Welcome to the AlphaList podcast. I am your host, Toby. AlphaList is a closed community with over 600 CTOs who share their knowledge and experience in a Slack space and at events. With this podcast, we want to give our members and interested parties insights into the thoughts and ideas of top CTOs. If you're interested in becoming a member of the community, please visit alphalist.com to find out more on how to apply. This episode is proudly presented by Dell Technologies. They are a team of experts that helps you solving all your IT-related challenges and IT needs in your daily business and consult you in choosing the right end-to-end IT solutions or products. They offer IT technology solutions for companies of any size, tailored to their needs, and have a huge product portfolio with IT solutions and know-how. They can help CTOs through providing end-to-end IT solutions, be it laptops, PCs, workstations, or server, storage, cloud, and IoT solutions or financing. If you want to know more, please check the show notes to get a link. Welcome to the AlphaList podcast. I am your host, Toby, and today my guest, just following DHH, David Heinemeier Hansen, the inventor of Rails, is the inventor of the popular Laravel framework, Taylor Otwell. So he initiated it, I think, around 10 years ago, and is the CEO of the company behind it. So the company called Laravel as well. And I think he's a very interesting person with interesting opinions. And I think it's a great follow-up for the discussion I had with David, because I see similarities between both frameworks. And maybe he can tell us a bit more about the similarities and the inspiration, and also how he sees it as of today. Welcome, Tyler.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, maybe as a first question, you can tell us a bit more about how you actually came there. What is your nerd path? How did you get into programming, and how did your career go so far?
Yeah, so I started programming when I was basically a kid. I started building simple websites when I was probably 11 or 12 years old, just using HTML, and I don't think I was even using CSS back then. I eventually started programming in high school on my calculator, my graphic calculator during class. I would build little games on that. And then I went to university and majored in information technology. And after that, I graduated and was a programmer at a large trucking company here in the US called ArcBest Freight. And there I worked on C# programs, VB.NET programs, and also COBOL programs, some of which were written before I was born, actually. I did that for a few years, and then I really wanted to start tinkering with my own way to build my own business ideas, basically my own startup ideas. And I had done a little bit of PHP in college for various class projects and stuff like that, so I knew it was pretty easy to use, pretty easy to deploy. So I started tinkering with that and sort of wrote my own framework for how to efficiently build websites and web applications in PHP, and put it out in the world, and sort of accidentally became a famous PHP programmer after that, once people started using it.
Okay, interesting. And did you have inspirations back then when you started it? I'm just asking because I'm a Rails guy, and I kind of saw it and felt, okay, yeah, this looks familiar. It looks good, actually. I mean, for a PHP framework, I also did a lot of PHP back then, before I migrated to Rails. And kind of felt like that this is kind of a nice way to do a PHP framework. What?
Yeah, so my goal was never really to build a popular PHP framework. At the time, my goal was to launch a business. I didn't really have a solid idea of what business that would be, but I wanted to have my own base camp, basically, or my own whatever, my own SaaS startup. And Laravel was just a way to let me build that faster, but it was never really intended to be the main goal. It only became like kind of accidentally a business later, but at first that was not really my intention. And I, of course, had no idea that it would become as popular as it did over time.
And you then started your first own SaaS company. Which one was it? Or SaaS project?
Yeah, the first SaaS I launched was Laravel Forge. I launched it in the summer of 2014. So Laravel had actually been released for about 3 years before I was able to launch that SaaS and sort of monetize the framework in any serious way. I had previously written like an ebook or like a training book about Laravel and made a little money. I think I made something like $100,000 on that book, which was a good amount of money, but not enough money to like change my life or quit my job or necessarily or anything like that. But in 2014, I launched Forge and very quickly replaced, my salary at my job, and then doubled my salary. And then I kind of had to make the decision to go full time on Laravel because I could no longer do both, maintaining Laravel and having a job.
And also maintain Forge as like one of your first products then. But how was your time split between like maintaining the framework and doing essentially open source work, which you maybe don't charge customers for, and your framework? What was the split there?
It was probably about 50-50. I would spend a lot of time still working on the framework, of course, building the features that I needed to build Forge, building features that other people were submitting to me through pull requests and things like that on GitHub. And then also answering customer support tickets on Forge. And of course, Forge was smaller back then, so it was a little bit easier for me to manage by myself. I later needed to bring on help, of course, and hired staff. A guy named Mohammed Saeed, who was a contributor to Laravel before I hired him. He was my first hire and really helped me out a lot with, being able to maintain both Forge and Laravel, and eventually brought on other staff members, of course, later on.
And how many people do you employ these days?
Well, I think we have about 5 or 6 people. All of us are programmers. So we have like a couple of people working on Laravel Forge, people on Laravel Vapor. We have a person dedicated just to open source, actually. His name is Dries, based out of Belgium. So he actually spends his whole day working on open source issues and tickets and triaging things, surfacing things to me that I may need to take a look at. So that's actually his full-time job, just because the open source stuff has become such a big deal and so busy. And then we have basically a person dedicated to each product.
Okay. That's really a unique thing out there, right? Or do you see like a comparable company?
It's definitely a small company. We're actually trying to hire right now a couple more people because I think we're a little understaffed. I don't totally know of a great comparison with another company. It is a pretty unique situation, I think, and not something I can really draw a one-to-one comparison with.
To be honest, like recently, there were like a few pictures of your house on Twitter, and you just recently bought like the craziest house that I've seen for ages. So it must be very profitable as well.
Yeah, I think I've kept the business so lean, and when the businesses are bringing in millions of dollars and the profit margins are so high and the business is so lean, thankfully I've been able to be really successful with it. I also live in a place that's very affordable. So that makes a big difference. I don't live in New York, actually, or like San Francisco. I live in Arkansas, which is probably one of the most affordable places to live in the United States. So that makes it a lot easier for me as well. But yeah, the business has always been really lean, maybe a little too lean. Like I said, I'd like to bring on a couple more people now. Yeah. But yeah, that's kept it simple and profitable over the years.
So you make like, I don't know, like a mid single digit ARR with it, I guess, then like just reading the signs.
Yeah, I think a good year for us would be in the $6 to $7 million range across the whole ecosystem. Forge, Envoyer, Vapor, Spark, Nova, all combined. have a pretty good, a nice revenue stream for us as a lean team.
And how much do you actually integrate those components and ideas into your open source work? I mean, how much is it set in stone where you deploy your application to, and how much do you pay for? Do you charge for components as well, or?
Yeah, so this has always been kind of a sticky subject for us to figure out because, of course, we don't want to require everyone that uses Laravel to be forced to use this commercial product to deploy their application. So no, you don't really have to deploy to any one in any one way or to any one service. You can deploy Laravel to Heroku or Google Cloud or whatever, not using Forge. So we just try to make it as easy and streamlined as possible to be the most obvious choice to deploy your Laravel application because we actually maintain Laravel. We integrate with the features of the framework really well. And we can kind of build, like it wouldn't make sense for someone like DigitalOcean or AWS to build a very Laravel specific thing just because that's such a niche market for them. But for us, we can really fine tune and make it the best Laravel experience we can, which I think helps us capture a lot of that market. We do sell some, I guess you would say, components. We have a thing called Laravel Spark where basically what it is all of my experience and sort of the code I had to write building Laravel Forge and building Envoyer as these SaaS products. I basically bundled that up into this SaaS starter kit for Laravel, you might say, and called it Laravel Spark. And we do sell that as like a one-time product. It's not a recurring subscription like Laravel Forge. It's basically a one-time $99 payment and you get the code and you're done. And it's sort of a head start on building your SaaS in Laravel.
That absolutely makes sense. And I think like also when I look at the open source world, it kind of like, I just have the comparison with Rails. It kind of would make sense for some components to be commercial and for some developers to actually be paid for the stuff for the great work they did there. It's just not possible, right? And I think sponsoring is kind of the very indirect way to do so. Did you ever think about that, or do you do sponsoring at Laravel?
We do some sponsoring. It's a little bit different than I would say like pure sponsors. So what we do is we have something called a Laravel Partners Program. And it's basically development agencies or consultancies that build Laravel applications for clients around the world. And they pay to be these sort of vetted Laravel partners that I have a relationship with, and I've ensured that their work has good quality. And it's basically this directory of agencies that people can go to if they need Laravel work done, and they can trust that these people know what they're doing with Laravel. And those people pay me a monthly fee. So that's a little different than like traditional open source sponsorship on GitHub, where just like people are donating $4 a month or $5 a month to the repository or whatever, which I don't think it's like rarely sustainable. I think that someone can make enough money on just pure donations to actually make a living off open source. Like all the examples I can think of, like, for example, like Vue.js. Vue is a popular JavaScript framework. The creator Evan Yu has basically a sponsorship or program where if you sponsor, you get ad space on the website. And to me, that's like selling a product. You're selling ad space. It's not like pure donations is sustaining the project. It's the sell of ad space and stuff like that that's sustaining the project. So I think that's how we've done sponsorships is through that partners program.
Interesting. I mean, you built basically so many components around the framework that I know no comparable tool, no comparable framework. I mean, you even built a conference, right?
Right. Yeah. Laracon, both in the US and in Europe. And we've also had conferences in Australia, and we have an online conference. We had an online conference actually before COVID. We had done it for several years. But since COVID, we've transitioned to primarily online. We are going to try to have an in-person conference in Europe again this summer. Hopefully once things have died down a little bit.
I hope so too. Yeah. And what is your end game? What is your vision for Laravel?
Oh gosh, I've honestly built more than I ever anticipated ever building when I started building Laravel. So where it goes from here, I'm not totally sure. Of course, we're still working on improving things every day. I still really like working on Laravel, the framework itself, making it better, streamlining it. Things I would personally like to do in the future are things like build a SaaS or build a business that is not so tied to Laravel, more diversified, still interesting maybe to developers, but not so integrated into the Laravel space, like Basecamp, not a project management tool, but, something that's Basecamp is disconnected from Rails, that's not something that only Rails developers use. I'd like to build something like that in the future. One, just because I think it'd be kind of fun to do and different from everything I've done in the past. And then two, I think it would be a really good way to explore the framework and see how it performs in these sort of situations where I've never really used it. I think it would be a good way to find new features that might be great for Laravel or to spin off new tools, and I think I think DHH has done that in the Rails ecosystem a lot, where they take some approach to building things a certain way in Basecamp and it works out well for them, and they extract it into Rails. It could be like Action Text or Turbo or Hotwire or some of the latest stuff they've released. That's all stuff that they sort of developed while they were building Basecamp. And I think it would be cool for me to do that as well. And of course, I've done that with Forge and Envoyer and Nova and all that. But to do it in a non-developer SaaS, I think would be cool.
And you would always use Laravel, obviously, for whatever you do. Why did you choose PHP as the language? To be honest, I kind of stepped away from PHP at a certain time and thought, I'm just coming back whenever newline 2BR function is gone. And it's still there, unfortunately. So why PHP?
I think, it's just like one of those things in life that's just this like random decision that has such bigger implications than you can imagine. So like back when I was in college, I had a project. I still remember the guy's name. My partner in this project was named Alfonso, and we were assigned to build like a small website for our class. And he was like, let's build it in PHP. I know PHP. It's really easy. Like it'll be easy for us all to use. So I was like, okay, great. We'll use PHP. There was no set language we had to use or anything. So we start using it and we build the project and done. So years later, when I'm working in C# and VB.NET and I wanted to build my own sort of web SaaS, I could have done it in .NET, of course. But it was more expensive. I would have had to buy Visual Studio for my like home computer. The hosting was more expensive. The deployment story was more complicated for how to actually deploy a .NET project onto the internet. And this was kind of before, Azure and all of that was kind of a big deal. So I remember that project I had done back in university where it was like, well, maybe I'll just do it in PHP. I can just use Sublime Text or Notepad++ or whatever. I don't need like a separate IDE to develop it. And it'd be really easy to just throw up on some $10 a month host, and so that's honestly why I started doing it, is because of that. I knew from my past that it was kind of easy to use, and I had never written a single line of PHP before in my life other than that one project. But it just kind of worked out that way. And once Laravel got popular, I just sort of accidentally had become this PHP programmer, which was not what I originally started out as. I was more of a .NET developer.
So you did it because it was easy to use and simple to use.
Essentially, yeah.
And how do you see like the world as it is now? If you look at the different frameworks and the different options you have there, typically companies these days choose like a framework for single page web apps, like Vue or React, and then like an underlying framework. They do like backend front-end communication. They have state in the browser. So honestly, that is a lot of complexity if you just compare it to the way we build websites in the back in the zeros, right? Do you see a trend going back to this simplicity?
In certain ecosystems, I think there is some pushback. I think you see that in Rails with Hotwire and Turbo, where DHH is a very like simple likes things simple. So would love to get rid of like Webpack and all these compilation tools and this crazy JavaScript stuff. And you see that in Laravel with tools like Livewire, which is inspired by Hotwire, which actually comes out of the Elixir ecosystem and the Phoenix framework in that ecosystem, which is a way to basically build these very interactive and sort of real-time feeling modern web applications just using PHP and not using a lot of JavaScript at all, maybe just sprinkling some in here and there when you need it. So in certain ecosystems, I do see some pushback on the complexity of modern single-page applications. I'm not sure if that is like, true for all of web development. I think that these sorts of building the front end in Vue or React and then communicating with the back end does seem to be very popular. I'm not sure if the pushback will have enough momentum to overcome that. I definitely agree. It's so much more complicated than how we used to build things. And it's hard to say sometimes if the benefits are really worth it. It probably just depends on the company and the team of developers that are building the project.
Yeah, I mean, Amazon doesn't have an SPA as far as I know, right?
Yeah, I mean, probably most people don't, there's so many big web applications, like GitHub is built with Rails, or Shopify is built with Rails. Airbnb is built with Rails. These are running on traditional like web frameworks.
About You is built with Laravel, but I think they have like a Vue framework attached to it or something.
Yeah. So like my approach to that is I think there's two ways you can like approach that. You could just kind of stick your head in the sand and say like, nope, the Laravel way or like the traditional Rails way is the best way to build things. And we're not going to accommodate these other approaches at all, the end. And there's a part of me that would love to do that, but I'm really hesitant to do that because I think you can get left behind really quickly if you're not willing to sort of...
And you lose people on the way, right? You lose a lot of people on the way.
So my approach lately, like over the past year, I would say has been to, okay, like obviously people are building web apps this way, like it or not. They're building Vue front ends and React front ends, and they're talking to Laravel backends, Python backends, Ruby backends, whatever. And okay, we just have to accept that as reality. And how are we going to fit into that reality and position Laravel to be a great option for that backend framework that they need to talk to? So, I mean, going forward, I'm going to be looking into, okay, how do we have a great, really good official GraphQL offering in Laravel? Because people building these front end apps, they're going to want to talk to a GraphQL backend, and how are we going to accommodate that? Rather than saying, no, GraphQL sucks, these front ends suck, and we're just going to keep using only PHP, like that, we're just going to be left behind over the years, whether we like it or not.
Yeah. I guess that strategy is valid. But if you could choose now how to build your next application, and it would be, let's say, relatively front end heavy, but not necessarily, I don't know, over complex, what would you do?
I would be tempted to use tools like Inertia, which I think is still sort of limited a little bit to the Laravel ecosystem, even though there is a Rails adapter for it. And basically, I think it tries to combine the best of both worlds. So like for your listeners that may not have heard of it, Inertia is this project originally started by Jonathan Rennig, where the routing and the data hydration of your pages is all handled in the Laravel side or the Rails side, but you're still using Vue or React on the front end. So when it hits like a route in your web application, you return a Vue page or React page with all the data it needs. And then from there, you're in a normal Vue app. So it's a lot like using Vue or React, except without the complexity of the client-side routing, the client-side data retrieval, and all of the sort of performance complexities that come with that, and just general development complexities. And you still get to keep everything in sort of one repository instead of having a separate front end app and a separate back end app. So that's probably what I would do on a new app, or just use something like Livewire, and just stick it all in PHP. But lately I've been using Inertia more than anything else.
Our beloved sponsor, the Google Cloud, is calling all those shaping the future, building the next generation of applications in the cloud, and looking to grow fast. Join the Google Cloud experts at the digital event Scale Up Spotlights. Speakers including Kielce Hightower and Lakshmanan will be sharing can't-miss updates for tech leaders on the brink or on the throes of scaling up. Come be inspired and learn about the latest from Google Cloud and how their customers are deploying serverlessly, automating, and turning to managed services to drive innovation without worrying about or dedicating excessive time to managing underlying infrastructure. Following the presentations, ask your toughest technical and strategic questions to the world's biggest and best Google Cloud experts. Check out the agenda and register today. The event will take place on March 30 at 10:30 Berlin time. To register, just visit g.co/scaleupspotlight. But in a way, it also is a bit strange, right? I mean, it's a bit comparable then to Next.js or Gatsby, like those static SPA builders, right? Way it's different, but the approach is similar. And I used those and kind of played with those, and it kind of ended making no sense to me, if I'm really honest. I mean, yes, the applications are fast, and yes, they feel like an SPA, but in a way, you can also have fast applications like just using HTML and like a good CDN and maybe good caching in a good CDN in the middle, and you don't need that pre-compilation stuff and so on. I mean, it's different for inertia, I guess.
It feels like there's a pretty big disconnect actually between front-end developers and back-end developers, and sometimes I don't think we really even understand each other that well. Where like I feel like the front-end developers are, of course, really good at front-end and JavaScript and client-side concerns and things like that. And they're trying to move more into a productive back-end offering, even things like Next.js and, server-side rendering and server-side components in React. And the back-end people are really good at like databases, SQL queries, queued jobs, all of that kind of back-end stuff. And we're trying to figure out, okay, well, what's the best way to write front end? So we're coming up with tools like Hotwire, Livewire, Inertia, and they're trying to figure out what's the best way to write back end. And they're coming up with tools like Next.js, Remix, Blitz. And to me, like neither side really clicks with the other side. I don't really understand some of the decisions that some of the JavaScript frameworks make in terms of how they want to do back-end stuff. And I'm sure they don't really understand like some of the decisions we're making with how we want to do front end stuff with Livewire and Hotwire and stuff like that. So I'm really interested to see like how this plays out over the next few years. I don't know. It's an interesting time, honestly, to be a web developer.
Yeah, it is. But still, to me, it every once in a while feels overly complex. If you look at the whole stack you need then to build an application. I mean, also with Inertia, you will need some sort of a build tool in JavaScript. You will need some sort of a dependency management solution and stuff like that. As far as I would guess.
Yeah. Well, like I would go so far to say is like, I mean, Rails came out in what, like 2004 or something like that?
Yeah, something
like that.
And
that was almost 18 years ago. And that's Rails. Laravel kind of stands on Rails' shoulders, and some would say even has an even more fleshed out ecosystem. But like to me, there's not a full stack JavaScript framework that's even equaled Rails productivity, and that's an 18-year-old framework. And so I think there's still, in terms of one person being able to sit down and build an entire SaaS, I think Rails and Laravel are still the most productive ways to do that. Like it's not really, and it's honestly not even very close, I would say, in terms of the productivity that you can get out of one person and one full stack framework. So I think there's still a lot of development and sort of exploration to be done in the JavaScript ecosystem in that sort of framework space, to kind of catch up a little bit because the ecosystems are so different.
Yeah, and you have so much re-platforming happening there, right? In that JavaScript world, from my perspective, it's crazy. Like you can change build tools every second week.
Yeah. And I think also one thing that is new for me is like in that world, it's much more preferred to have like some backend as a service, like Firebase or whatever Hasura or all these other tools versus like in the Rails or Laravel world, it's just like, give me a MySQL server, and I'm good. So it's just a very different world and one I'm still learning about, but at the same time, don't want to discount or like not trying to look down upon it in any way. Just like, what can I learn from this and how does Laravel fit into this story, over the next 10 years of web development?
But do you think in 10 years we will have full stack developers again? I mean, the job of the full stack developer is kind of hard to find, but if you find like the one productive guy that's productive with Laravel, he will solve all your problems, not only your front end. And I mean, same could apply to like a JavaScript developer that just like is very good on the backend side as well. Like, will that job still exist in a few years?
I'm not sure. I hope so. I think, I think it's possible because the tools are there and they're better than ever, honestly. If we can just sort of make them less complex to get started with, like tools like Laravel, and then on the front end, CSS tools like Tailwind, JavaScript tools like Vue and React. I think at the end of the day, they actually are a lot better than using like jQuery and PHP or like plain PHP without a framework, and jQuery and just sprinkling in a bunch of libraries. I do think things are actually much more productive, much more organized, much easier to build things with. But we just have to reduce complexity. And that's always been one of my biggest like focuses and jobs here at Laravel is to figure out how to reduce complexity in web development. I definitely think it's possible. I think it's pretty likely that job will still exist. I just think a lot of new developers seem to be coming into web development via JavaScript. Like they go through boot camps or they go through sort of training camps where they learn JavaScript. And I think that's different where like 10 years ago, you may have actually learned some PHP at a boot camp, or 15 years ago, you may have learned PHP or Rails as a boot camp like that. But now I think most of them are teaching JavaScript. And so it feels like a lot of developers are coming into web development only knowing JavaScript and only knowing front-end development. And they've maybe never written a SQL query, never interacted directly with a database at all. And so I don't know. We need to bridge that gap a little bit.
But couldn't you just like also build an e-learning platform with Laravel and just release good stuff, good content? I mean, that like
yes.
Reminds me of the early days with Rails when there were just videos released and everyone was excited about that. Like, why not just build that?
Right. And that's what we've tried to do with Laracast, which I don't, a lot of people assume that I run Laracast, laracast.com, which is basically a video training platform for Laravel with, over 1,000 videos by now. It's actually run by a guy named Jeffrey Way that lives in Florida. And he has been a longtime user of Laravel, and he does a really good job with that. And I think it's been one of the keys to Laravel's success, honestly, has been this Laracast platform existing because it's onboarded so many people onto the framework that otherwise maybe wouldn't have been able to learn it or would have had a hard time getting started. And so I think it's been really instrumental to Laravel's success, honestly. And I didn't even build it.
You should acquire it, potentially.
Yeah, I'm sure it does really well, honestly. I know he has lots of subscribers, thousands of subscribers to that platform. And we also have tried to build up our own YouTube presence. We have someone on staff here now that basically only focuses on video training. And we try to release 2 videos a week on our official YouTube channel. So that's something that's new for us within the last year that we're trying to flesh out a little bit. But I agree that it's really a training issue. And I've always been really focused on writing really good documentation, really clear guides on how to do everything. And now, of course, we're trying to branch into good video as well.
Do you ever sleep?
Yeah, I slept less back in the beginning. But while I still had a full-time job when I first launched Laravel, I would actually work on Laravel until 1 or 2 in the morning and then go to bed and then wake up at 7. And honestly, I felt great, but I was, 10 years younger than I am now. And just had one child. So things were simpler back then. Nowadays, since I work on Laravel full time during the day, I don't really honestly need to do that anymore. Since I work on Laravel pretty much 8 to 5 normal hours, and I don't really work on Laravel at night or in the early morning anymore.
And I guess your company is kind of remote first. Everyone works whenever he or she likes, or how does it work?
Yeah, we are a remote company. I'm actually the only one in the US, and then we have someone in Belgium, in the UK, in Portugal, in Egypt, in Malaysia. So we're spread out a little bit. Most of them, I think, work pretty traditional hours for their own time zones. So we have some overlap. About half the day I overlap with the European developers and the developer in the UK. So yeah, we use Slack and GitHub and Basecamp to kind of stay on track of things.
Basecamp, that is funny because like I barely know companies that do use Basecamp.
Yeah, we primarily use Basecamp for our daily check-ins. So we don't really have a lot of meetings. We just use the daily check-ins feature of Basecamp, and it basically asks every employee, what did you do today at the end of each day? Just so we can kind of see like what everyone's working on, if anyone's stuck on something, stuff like that.
Okay, so instead of doing stand-ups, like synchronous stand-ups.
Essentially, yeah. And that's almost the only feature we use in Basecamp, actually.
And how do you operate the company besides that? I mean, do you have is everyone responsible for his or her project then or product then? And you kind of focus on outcome, or do you have OKRs? How do you manage it?
Yeah, I mean, we the people that are working on the various projects kind of surface things to me like, hey, a lot of customers are having trouble with this, or I think it would be really cool if we added this feature. And we keep a list of those things. And then I go through and kind of organize them, prioritize them, and decide what I actually want us to tackle next. And of course, sometimes it's just our own ideas that are not based on customer feedback. But I'm more of like a curator of sorts in terms of organizing and determining what people are working on. And sometimes it's as simple as if it's a quick thing, they say, hey, the customers are getting confused by this. I think we should fix it. And I say, okay, cool, go do that. And they do it, and that's it. And it's very simple in that way. For bigger projects, I tend to be the one to organize it, to kind of decide when it's getting worked on. But it's a pretty simple, informal process. Since it's such a small company, it kind of feels weird to have a lot of red tape and bureaucracy around it. So it's pretty straightforward.
Okay. And how much do you contribute yourself? I mean, if you look at the Laravel core, how much is your code?
I contribute a lot still every day. I still contribute to Laravel because that's actually what I do on a daily basis. I don't actually write very much code at all for the commercial products. That's something that my team members do. I only work on essentially the open source framework, Laravel itself, and all of the open source libraries. So I manage all of the pull requests on GitHub still, and I'm still the only person that merges pull requests on Laravel. So I do that every day, every morning. And then I usually do any sort of R&D. Like if we're going to build a new product like Laravel Vapor, I built the entire 1.0 prototype of Laravel Vapor essentially by myself. Mm-hmm. Or like something like Laravel Horizon or some of our other open source tools. I R&D those tools all the way to basically a 1.0 release, just so that I can make sure that like all the APIs are right, that it feels really good, that it's sort of consistent with how all of our other things are built. And then from there, of course, other people can help contribute, but I do all of that R&D work.
So you do the MVP essentially,
yes.
Release it and test it out, and do the product management yourself and also the development. And you do that like fully on your own. You don't have any overlaps mm-hmm. with any other developers or.
Correct. Yeah.
That's cool. I mean, it's
yeah,
a bit like an incubator, right?
Yeah, basically. And it helps me, one, keeps my skills like fresh and current, helps me find new ideas for the framework itself. Because as I'm building an MVP, I might say like, this part of Laravel kind of sucks. We need to fix it. Because I'm actually using it in the real world now. And so that helps me find things that, may not be so great and fix them.
And how do you organize your working time? I mean, how much time do you spend on interrupting topics like emails and chat, and how do you structure your day?
I spend the first part of my day answering customer support tickets because across all of our products, I still handle any sort of like refund request or, if any customer is like really unsatisfied, I would handle that customer support case myself. I handle all of the GitHub pull requests. And I would say that takes about, those two things combined are probably the first 2 hours of my day usually. And then for the other, say 6 hours, I'm going to be checking in on any features I need to approve for the commercial products. So, for example, James, who's our employee that works most on Forge, he may have like a pull request for a new feature on Forge that I need to review, and I'll review that, kind of give my stamp of approval, and he'll ship that into production. That could take another hour to go through all of that. So, I'm getting close to lunch, I would say, by then. And then for the afternoon is when I'm probably going to be doing any of the sort of R&D work, any of the new Laravel work, any of the exploration stuff I need to do is going to be in sort of the back half of the day after lunch. And that's honestly pretty much how every day is set up for me.
Okay. And you also have a family. How do you align that with your family? That you kind of internerd things a lot?
Yeah. Both my kids are actually in school, during the school year. So it's honestly pretty easy. I just get off work at 5, and it's just like any other, just like if I had a job, honestly, at an office and got home at 5, it's just like a normal family night, from there, have dinner and hang out with the family and stuff. And I don't really work anymore, outside of work hours, just because I don't need to, with Laravel being a full-time job. So it doesn't feel, it just feels like a typical thing. It doesn't feel like any big life consuming thing.
Maybe with a bit more freedom, because you work from home essentially and can jump off in the afternoon if you want, or continue later.
Yeah, for sure. I've been working from home since 2012 when I got into PHP. So already had a lot of experience working from home before COVID, and definitely makes things convenient in that regard.
Okay. And like, if you look at your small amount of people, you like keeping it that way because you want to avoid synchronization, or is it just because it's easier to control? What is your why do you do it?
I think because it's been easy to control a little bit, easy to stay on top of. And I also think that, I'm a programmer, really. I'm not really a manager. I'm not really trained to be a manager. And so I think as the team grows, which I think we need to, if we want to push Laravel further, I think we need some more people helping us out. It may make sense that there comes a point where I bring on someone that's a little more trained or skilled in that area to be sort of a product manager of sorts. It could be even someone from within. I think a lot of our team members are talented enough to do that, to where they can sort of manage those things. Because that's why I've always kept it small, is I've been a little bit afraid to have to manage more people and have to manage more employees and organize work for them, make sure they're happy, make sure they're, working on interesting things, that they're not burning out, things like that. That's why I've always kept it small, because it's simpler to manage that. But I think that could change in the next year. I think we could bring on 2 or 3 more people and grow a little bit more.
If you look at the last year, what would you say were your 3 key learnings in your business life?
Oh gosh. It's hard to say in the last year. If I just look in general, I would say that some of the key learnings for me have been to focus on not getting distracted from like your core philosophy and core personality of your product. So when I look back on Laravel, I can think of the times where like I don't think we did the right thing. Have always been times where I was trying to like appease someone else's vision for what Laravel should be. You know what I mean? Or versus like what I think would be best for Laravel. And I think that always sort of got distracting and led us off track and things like that. So I would say just staying true to what I wanted Laravel to be for me. And then 2, focusing on working on things that actually have a good return on investment. It's really easy, I think, for people that are building SaaSes or small businesses to get focused on things that don't actually matter. Either because their personality is such that just like, they kind of focus on all the little nitty gritty details that are sort of irrelevant and don't see the forest for the trees. It's really easy to do that, I think, as a small company of just a few developers, especially because developers tend to be very like, they tend to have a certain personality type sometimes where they just kind of hone in on these small little details that maybe not are so relevant for the success of the business. So when you're building features, when you're trying to build products, focus on things that actually have a good market and a good return on investment. It seems like obvious to say that.
Sounds so easy, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds obvious to say that from a business perspective, but it's just surprising like how many people don't do that. And then 3, I think always do a really good job of keeping things accessible, marketing things well, making them easy to onboard to, a lot of times I'll go look at like a website and I honestly just come away with not a very clear picture of what problem something's even solving, or what are they actually trying to do for me to make my life better, which is kind of the end goal of software, I guess, is to sort of improve, make some task easier, improve people's lives in some way. And sometimes it's just not clear. So focus on making things clear, accessible, a clear pitch of what value you're actually bringing to the table. Those have been things I've focused on.
Okay, thanks a lot. So then a question I also always like I tend to have like tools I just bug people with because I like them so much, like a new SaaS that I want to convince everyone of. Do you have any of those tools you would recommend right now?
Gosh, I mean, the tools that I use the most are honestly pretty simple tools. Like, I'm a huge user of Todoist, the to-do list app. I use it. I run my whole life basically out of that app, and would gladly pay like $200 a month for that app. That's sort of one of the main tools I use the most, and really the main one that comes to mind right now. I'm also a pretty big fan of Notion to keep things organized. That's where I keep a lot of like notes and documents for little ideas I have, or little like, if I have a new like product idea, I'll write like a little pitch for it in there, stuff like that. Those are 2 tools I use a lot.
So talking of Notion, like just from my perspective, I haven't used it in a professional context in a very deep way, because I always got the impression that it's kind of just a reinvented Confluence. Like it just looks nicer, right? And I think like the core problem in a lot of companies is that people find it attractive because it looks nicer and it maybe has like a few features that make it easier. But whenever you have a certain set of documentation and a certain size of your space, it gets very hard to maintain. Is it the same with Notion, or would you say it's just easier?
We're a small company, so it's hard to say. And I also use Notion a lot for just like my own private stuff, not for sharing company documents necessarily. So like I have my own private Notion with like my current projects I'm working on and little notes about them. And then also I even keep like a little scratch pad in Notion to jot down ideas or a list of links that I want to come back to. I use it for a lot of just like my own personal stuff. So it's hard to say. It is so like free form. I could see that it could become hard to organize if you're not careful in a large company. And, I think your point about just having a better UI is interesting and something I've thought about a lot, where it seems like a lot of tools are that way, like even Slack, is just sort of a better UI on top of chat.
Better IRC, yeah.
Yeah, sure. A better IRC, easier onboarding. It looks better, things like that. And whether it's technically better or whatever is irrelevant. It just has a fresh coat of paint. And so people will buy it.
Yeah, but that has a lot of truth, I think. And I think it's actually the same applies to frameworks, and the same applies to the marketing you do around frameworks, or you should do around frameworks, that if you do your job right, it's just making it a bit simpler, a bit easier to use, a bit more fun to use.
Yeah, I think
appealing.
it's like, I mean, it's actually a perfectly valid like business strategy. Like there's a lot of, it's actually really valid, I think, to come into SaaS and build an app of a market space that already has a lot of competitors, even maybe say like a podcasting app, something like Transistor or like, I don't know, Simplecast or whatever. There's lots of apps where you can host your podcast, but if you come into that space, the market is already proven, right? The market exists. There's lots of customers out there willing to try these kinds of things. And if you just put a fresh coat of paint on it and maybe a couple of new features and it looks really nice, you probably have a business, like you're probably going to get some customers. So I think it's like, it's a pretty valid and interesting way to launch a SaaS, honestly, and maybe the safer way to launch a SaaS rather than launching into some market space that is not proven that there's any customers at all that even exists in the world.
So have you hired a designer then?
So this is actually interesting. Just within the last couple of weeks, I came across this service called Design Joy. I don't know if you've seen this, but it's one person, and you subscribe for $2,500 per month, and you get access to them as like a designer on retainer for any design needs you have. And they closed off subscriptions at like, I don't know how many people. I think it was 40 or 50 people that he has signed up for this. So he's making $1 million a year with 40, 50 customers. And you just get and there's not even really an app. He gives you access to a Trello board where you drop your design request to. And it's just like, holy cow, this is such like a genius idea. His designs are really good. I mean, it's a really top-notch designs for apps or for just marketing stuff or whatever you need. And it's like, holy cow, what a business. 50 customers, $1 million a year. You didn't even have to build an app. You didn't have to code an app. You're just using Trello. It's just, I don't know. I was really impressed by the whole concept, honestly.
So you're using that instead of a designer?
Yeah. Yeah, I honestly, it's so new. I just signed up for it last week. I haven't even used it yet, but that's what I plan on using. In the past,
maybe that's the strategy.
Well, exactly. Like you're getting $2,500 a month from people. Sometimes they need you, sometimes they don't. But what do they care? Like it's cheaper than hiring like a designer full time necessarily. So in the past I've used, I've kind of contracted designers as needed. And I've even had part-time designers on staff, like Steve Shoger, who now is the co-founder of Tailwind Labs and works on Tailwind UI. He actually worked for me part-time years ago, maybe 2017, 2018, before they went full-time on Tailwind. But now I'm trying this Design Joy thing. So we'll see how it goes. I'm kind of excited about it.
Yeah, excited to talk again and hear your opinion in half a year.
Yeah.
I still have like a little surprise for you. So one of your team members actually told me about a little Easter egg that you built into Envoyer. It can actually deploy us into the past. It makes us travel in time, and it's very easy. We just have to like hit a little or type a little cheat code into the JavaScript console, and then you get like a date picker where you can pick a date. And I decided to pick the year of 2011 when you actually started with Laravel, and we now hit deploy, and we can now observe yourself like little Taylor working, just getting started with the framework, and you now have the chance to actually whisper something into young Taylor's ears. What would it be?
I think I would go back to what I said earlier about sticking to your vision for what you want to build. As you're building something, especially in open source, there will be a lot of people that say, I don't like this, or I think it should work this way, or this is stupid, or this is useless. And they'll give you all these ideas for how it should work. And then you'll have another group of people that are really excited about it. Like, this changed my career. This made my life so much easier, blah, blah, blah. And it can be really easy to focus on the people that are super negative and like, okay, well, if I build this one feature they want, maybe that will convince them to use Laravel, and like I will have converted them, to my way of doing things. And I found that honestly, it never really works that way. Like as you build something to try to appease your detractors, they will just find another thing, to like not use it for some other reason. And it's just a treadmill of like reasons for trying to satisfy those people. So if I was going to go back and tell myself anything, it would be just to focus on the people that actually love Laravel and enjoy using it, and build for them and build for yourself and what you want to build to make your life happier, because the point of running a business or having these kinds of things is ideally, I think, to make your life better. So if it's not making your life better, then what was the point of anything, So focus on staying true to what your vision is and your philosophy is for your product or tool or SaaS or whatever, and just build it that way.
Great. Thanks a lot, Taylor, for being my guest. And I hope we have the chance again in the future. Really, like enjoying a lot, like to see all the success that you have with Laravel. And I'm sure you win.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
See you soon. Bye-bye.